All right, so this video is intended to walk you through the first project and the requirements that I'll be looking for as you make your first game in Unit 4. So this one is called Color Nerve. So it says in this programming assignment, you will create programs that use conditional statements and their variations, as well as user input to create a color nerve game. Your program must be well documented, easy to read, and free of errors. So just like your last program, your program will need to include the following. So you'll have to have this piece at the beginning with your information and a summary of the game. Then you will need to carefully document throughout your program, so that's stating things like before variables, before conditionals. Remember, you should never go a few lines of code without commenting. You should have many, many comments throughout your program explaining its purpose. So if you or anybody else were to go back in there at a later date, they would know the purpose there. So make sure that you're commenting well throughout your program. I do look for that and require high amounts of commenting. Next, you need to include these 3 prompts at the end of your program. So in this program, I use this new concept to accomplish this. I liked this. I did not like this. And then here's a breakdown of how you will be awarded points for this program and the 4 things you will need to do as you turn it in. So if you have any questions, please make sure you see me. If you can't find the hand in folder, please make sure you see me as well. So if you go to the back side, I'm going to demonstrate this game for you, and I'm going to try to explain it to the best of my ability. So it says Unit 4A Project Color Nerve. You're going to create a multiplayer game. So that means this game will have 2 players called Color Nerve with the following requirements. 1. When player 1 presses his or her controller or 3 keys selected on the keyboard by you, the values of red, green, and blue will increase. So this means player 1 must have a controller and a keyboard option. So they can press the controller or the keyboard, and red, green, and blue will increase accordingly. This does not mean player 1 is on one game controller and player 2 is on the keyboard. This means player 1 has a keyboard and an option on the gamepad as well. There are 2 ways to do it. So he can press his controller or he can press his keys, and I should be able to test with the keyboard and the controller for each player. Player 2 will then have their own controller and their 3 own keys. So you'll have to select these on the keyboard. So you could do R, E, and W for player 1 and I, O, and P for player 2, however you'd like to do that. But each player must have a set of gamepad controls and keyboard controls. Now, this is the part that can be a little confusing. The goal of this game is to get extremely close to having the values of red, green, and blue hit 255, but to not go over. If you are the cause of the color going over as you're increasing the colors red, green, and blue in the background, then you lose. So it says if player 1 is pressing the button or key of the color that reached the maximum value. So for example, if player 1 was pressing red when red reached the value of 255, then the screen would appear black and the game would be over. So what this is stating right here is player 1 loses when this takes place, because you do not want to cause the red, green, or blue intensities to go over. Here, player 2 loses. So if player 2 is pressing the color that goes over, then player 2 loses and the screen will turn white. So you can see those different requirements here. You can see the screen turns black or the screen turns white. So I want to demonstrate this game for you. I think it'll make a little bit more sense. So you can see my colors in here, my programs in here. So I start the game. You'll notice that the screen starts black because that's when red, green, and blue are 0. Now for player 1, I'm pressing the red button. So I press red for a little bit. Okay. Now it's player 2's turn and they can press whatever color they want. So say player 2 presses red for a little bit on their keyboard. Then player 1 presses red for a little bit. Ooh, they've gotten close, but they haven't hit 255. Player 2, player 1, and player 1 is pressing red when red reaches its maximum value of 255. So what happens is player 1 and player 2 press the values to increase the color on the background. And if you are the cause of a color going over 255, then you lose. And then in this case, you can see because the screen turned black, player 1 lost the game. Now, if I play this game again, and let's say, okay, red is increasing for player 1. Now red is increasing for player 2. Player 1, player 2. And player 2 is the cause of red going over its value of 255. The screen goes white. So essentially the idea behind this game is you want to keep pressing colors, trying to get red, green, and blue to be close to 255, but to not quite go over. So say I was playing player 1 and player 2. Say player 1 starts by pressing blue. Player 2 presses red. Player 1 now presses green. Player 2 now presses green. Player 1 now presses red. Player 2 now presses blue. Player 1 presses red again. Player 2 presses red again. Player 1 decides to try and get close to red at 255, and they go over. So you can see here, player 1 was the cause of a color intensity going over, so player 1 has lost the game. If you need further instruction here, please let me know. This game can sometimes be a little bit confusing for students, but it's a pretty basic game. So now if I go back to the screen here, some questions to ponder. How can you track whether the game is over or not? So the idea behind this program is you're going to have to know whether or not the colors should be increasing, or if the color should just be on the background of the screen as black or white, because you notice that once I caused the color to go over, the screen turned black or the screen turned white, and no other colors incremented. It just turned black or white and stopped. So how can you track whether or not the game is over? Then it says, what code will you need to run when your game is over? So what will need to happen when your game ends? So when somebody loses or when someone wins, what should be happening on the screen? It says, when does the game end? How do you change the values of red, green, and blue for each player? Remember, they each need to have a gamepad and a keyboard form of input. And how can you incorporate both the gamepad and keyboard controls into your game? I do have a couple of extensions on the bottom if you would like to incorporate those into your game. Just if you want to challenge yourself a little bit further, you can feel free. Essentially what I do for students that meet these challenges is I will give them points back if they for some reason lose points elsewhere. So again, to show you this game one more time, you increase the colors one player at a time. And ultimately, someone is going to lose. And then even if I press red or blue, you will see that the color doesn't change. So here the screen is black. It doesn't change for me anymore. You can hear me pushing those buttons. It doesn't change. And I can play that one more time to show you what happens again. But you'll notice, okay, player 1, player 2, player 1. And there we go. So from here, you can see if I keep pressing the red key, that nothing is changing. The color stays there because the game is lost. Player 2 lost the game. Player 2 caused the game to go over. So again, if you have further questions, please let me know. Rewatch the video if you need to, and best of luck meeting this new challenge.